It is indeed an honor to be here before everyone tonight to celebrate what we believe to be is a dynamic individual who's impacted so many of us here in this room and in our community and in the state of New York. Coach Tom Nowak. Let's give it up for Coach Tom Nowak.
Your willingness to give back to the Elba students, sharing your basketball knowledge and volunteering and teaching fundamental skills. Just this year, Tom has been working with our 5th and 6th graders, actually 3rd through 6th graders coming back to Elba, working on fundamentals. He's been working with our boys basketball team. You know, usually when people reach their end of their career, they're done. You don't see an end of them. So thanks to that, Coach. Number 7, your uncanny ability to deal with the array of personalities and attitudes of Elba families and athletes. For example, the Bisons, the Agellos, the Zambitos, the Pengrazios, the Torreys, the Marshalls, the Nortons, the Egleys, the Angles, the Dormans, the Riggs, the Smith. I could go on and on. Number 6, your ability to motivate athletes and make them believe they're better than their opponents and they can win every game. Number 5, your willingness to continue to learn about the sport, the way you study the game through tapes, clinics, and reading books. Number 4, your ability to change with kids and generations. Through your 30 plus years, my gosh, you went from giving kids water breaks to giving them cell phone breaks. Number 3, your ability to prepare for games and practices. Nobody does it better. Number 2, like Rosie mentioned, your organizational skills and your work ethic. And now, the number 1 reason why you're the best coach in Section 5. It is because of your wife, Laura. Lori, thanks for allowing Tom to coach all those years and make a positive impact on our athletes and our community. We truly do appreciate it. Tom, on behalf of the Elba community, Elba Central School, thank you for your years of dedication, your everlasting memories, and all the championships. In particular, the girls basketball state championship. I will never forget that gymnasium that night when we returned from Albany. It was an unbelievable night. Thanks for the memories.
You may not have recognized me in some of those pictures under all the hair, but of the slides of the teams from 90 to 93, I was buried in there. In the 20 years since I've left Elba, it's kind of painful to think it's been 20 years. I've realized more and more how fortunate I was to have the coaching that I received here. Especially as I have children becoming involved in sports. I see that it's really rare to find an individual who is as dedicated to teaching and coaching and as tolerant of teenagers and their unruly parents as Mr. Nowak was. And I can say that because that was my family. So year after year, he took a mishmash of small town kids and turned them into champions. Amazing. 457 wins. Wow. And besides relying on the athletic family genes of so many Elba families, how did he do it? I mean, he didn't do it by just punching the clock, by showing up to practices and getting us through games. He did it by living the job. He showed us the dedication that he asked us to give. Day after day, during his free time, he would spend extra time letting me shoot baskets after practice. I'm sure much to the chagrin of Mrs. Nowak, who missed many a dinner and weekend with her husband. His free time was spent reviewing film, scouting the opponent, and creating our stat tables every year. He would list everyone's stats. And this was before the age of, Google Drive and Excel spreadsheets. He would get the ruler out and this device called a calculator, that some of the newer players may not know, and tabulate all of our statistics to make sure that we knew how we were performing. Just amazing. His vacation reading, were books on coaching. I mean, that's dedication. And this example of pouring oneself into the task is what rubbed off on the players. And we were able to carry this into our life and create success in our lives with the skills that he showed us. He showed us how dedication and hard work can transform individuals and teams and communities. And I can say that my life is surely better having been coached by Mr. Nowak. And I thank you. And I wish you all the best in a very well-deserved retirement. Cheers.
Couple interesting stories with football. I got married August 13th, 1977. Practice started August 23rd. I had just come back from my honeymoon. I remember I was in my mother's kitchen and it was a phone call from Elba Central School. Some guy by the name of Charlie O'Gene wanted to know when we were going to have practice. Well, I was told some other guy was my assistant coach. So we met the first night of the first practice as coaches. We had no, nowadays they have 50,000 meetings before you start the season. We had nothing. We just showed up that night. And we only had 2 coaches for the whole football program. We were expected to run a JV team and a varsity team with 2 coaches, which meant on a Thursday game day, Charlie would take the JV someplace and I would stay there with the varsity team. And that's all we had. And our biggest challenge, I really think, was trying to get the players to compete, because realistically there was no backups. So how do you get kids to compete when they know there's nobody behind them for the position? I thought we did a pretty good job striking fear into them and getting them to really, really work hard. That first game that Tony was talking about was at Cattaraugus. It was 2 hours and 15 minutes, not 6 hours, Tony. It was in New York State, Tony. But we had a rule. You got on a bus, you better bring your playbook. First of all, there was no iPods or any of this stuff, none of that stuff. We had a boombox that they could put in the back of the bus, but they couldn't use it. You were to sit quietly for 2 hours and 15 minutes and contemplate what you were going to do on the field. We had a pretty complicated offense. Tony was the center. He was a big stud guy, but he was great on the double team blocks. And Mogi, I believe you started out as a tight end. You played some fullback and you played some tight end for us. But we went down to Cattaraugus and we won that game. It was 14-8 was the score. Jerry Arnold scored. I can still remember the date. Jerry Arnold scored all 14 points. I know the plays he scored on exactly, but it was I remember after the game coming in the locker room and one of the guys, Swampy, which was Jimmy Mungillo, he was crying because we won a football game in Alba. And it was just a real great feeling. They got to listen to the boombox on the way home. So it was a lot shorter than 6 hours, but it was a really great game, and for me it was like a really great experience. Like Tony said, they really weren't very good, and I wasn't very smart, because usually you kind of figure out, like you check out to see if you're going to take a job. Am I going to die in this job, or am I going to make it? And they were really pretty bad, but there was great players on that team. Mark Charlo, one of the tackles on that team, went out and became a little All-American at Alfred University, played for Sam Sanders. He was a stud. I mean, there was just not many meaner guys than Mark. And I remember when I got there, the scrimmage was already set. We had to scrimmage Batavia JVs. And I said, that's the last time a varsity team's ever going to scrimmage a JV team. And I remember Mark hit a couple kids from Batavia. They didn't want any part of him. There were some really good kids on that team. Then my girls' basketball experience was really, I started out, I wasn't working on my final average salary yet, but I was chaperoning a girls' basketball game. I go in the gym, the music's on, and these girls are dancing like crazy. I'm like, is this a basketball game or is this a dance? Well, afterwards, the coach, Doreen Martin, left for a job in SIO, and the girls needed someone. And I think they're all my three special seniors are here, Heather, Tracy, and Dee, and they asked me, you want to coach? My wife's like, you don't want him to coach you. But they needed someone. I told her it was only going to be for 1 year. I kind of screwed up this thing. But the first game, I remember, I got sick. I was so sick. I was home throwing up, and we were playing. Our first game was against Notre Dame back then. They had a nice team. The Dwyer girls were playing, and Karen was she wasn't around yet because Darcy Murley was my JV coach. I tried to get Karen to cover for me that night. I think Charlie was going to cover, but we were afraid because Charlie would just cancel the game and bring up the wrestling match. So my wife says, I'm not driving you. I says, well, then I'm getting in, because I'm a stubborn Polish guy. I'm getting in the car, and I'm driving myself to the game. And I did drive to the game. I put a bucket right by the bench, so if I was going to puke, I had it right there, ready to go. We lost by 2 points. We were playing this new defense. It was called man-to-man with girl basketball, which really wasn't around back then much. And that was quite an experience for that first game. And Rosie talked about role models. Well, I had my role models. There's a guy, his name's John Ballard. Not Paul Ballard, John Ballard. And he was the football coach, athletic director at Dundee. And when I went there to start coaching, I was definitely ill-prepared to be a coach. Didn't know really. We all think we can coach, but it's different when you got to coach and you got to manage players. John was an unbelievable role model for me. He was the football coach, history department chairperson. He was hardworking, dedicated, disciplined, and I would just sit there and observe him. And he really kind of was the one person, the number one person in your life that you'd say, this is the guy that showed me the way. And I always remember going back over the years to Dundee to see him. I worked on a push to get him into the Football Hall of Fame because he was a great football coach, and he eventually did get in, and he passed away a few years ago. But what an awesome person, what an awesome role model for me. Some people in the area, I'll tell you what, I spent a lot of time with John Crite at Batavia High. John really showed me when we were looking to switch things around and getting into a little bit different offenses. John spent a lot of time with me. Dick Domenico over at Albion, Don Santini at Fairport. These were men that you could, it's funny, we'd go to a clinic and everybody thinks, what are those guys doing at the clinic? You'll learn a lot in the room, just sitting around, pulling out a beer, sitting down, talking, listening to people. And guys like Santini and Domenico, you learned what they did for respect and that kind of stuff, and you try to emulate those people as you were trying to coach. And those guys really, those 4 people were really, really important in my life as far as showing me the way to try to get better. Because, coaching is a process. It's not, I'm a coach from day one, I'm perfect. It's something you grow into, I think, as time goes on. And in basketball, later on, I spent a lot of time with Buddy Bradsky from Batavia, Scott Hemmer, who's now Geneseo. Talked to those guys a lot about things to do with basketball, and those people were really, really important. Now, success involves, as Rosie was talking about, involves a lot of ingredients. And first of all, as I'm not standing up here and saying I'm responsible for 457 wins or whatever in football. You know, it takes a lot of things. And first of all, you have to have some people coaching with you. You really do. And in football, it was Charlie O. You know, he was there for 22 years. He could have easily gone on somewhere else and coached, been a head coach for himself. He was true blue to Elba. He stayed around. And it's really kind of strange when you think about it. I'm a tall Polish guy from Buffalo. He's a short little Italian guy from Leroy. And we really meshed. We had a passion for winning. And really, he was so important in that program. You know, it's like one cannot survive without the other. So give him a round of applause. I went through the yearbook with 31 people I coached with for football alone. One of them's here tonight, and he left something for me when he retired. Is Mike Bromley. Glasses, Frank. Mike was our super scout. When we hired him, we'd send him all over the state to scout, like Teddy, but he was for football. And one year he went 5 times to Canisteo. And why do I got to go to Canisteo? Well, I gave him a map when he started, but when he was done coaching, it was like, this is all that was left of the thing, because he wore it out, going all over the place. But he was a heck of a scout. He came back with some really good, you know, this is before even the times of film, and that came back with some really good scouting reports for us. We had a lot of fun, a lot of dedicated people who did a lot for the program. There was, in basketball, I had 7 JV coaches, starting with Karen, who was 15 years, I believe, and boy, we really meshed. 2 Polish people, we just really got it together. The interesting thing is, she said she was my student in 7th grade, and I trained her so well that by the end of my career, she was out buying me beers all the time, which was really good. But she was an awesome coach, and so dedicated to the program. She knew we didn't have any managers. She got married, had twins, both boys, trained them immediately to become our managers, and they did a fantastic job. I mean, that's dedication to the program. Couple interesting facts about our coaches, and some of the stuff I, looking through the yearbook. We had, and they're here tonight, a husband and wife combination coaches. Johnny Hockmuth did football, and yep, I know she's a math teacher and you think she's mild-mannered, but Debbie Hockmuth, who was a great athlete at Elba, coached modified girls basketball for us. So we had the husband-wife team. We had 3 people who went on to become famous athletic directors. Karen, Mike Bromley at Batavia, and Jimmy Palermo over at Holly. Jimmy was our kicking coach. He's not here tonight, but one guy became one of the best cross-country track coaches in Genesee region. That was Art Goldstein over at Oakfield. Audie, as we used to call him, came in from New York City to Roger Langley went on a leave for 1 year. Artie came in. I remember his car, he had a little red car, packed up with all his clothes in the back of the car, and he came to Elba to teach, and then eventually went over and had a great career at Oakfield. We had a all-state football player coach for us, Danny Monticelli, related to the Angles, I believe. Correct, Scotty? Yes, he was an all-state player at Albion. He coached with us. 11 former players of mine are now coaching or have coached somewhere along the way, which is really nice. We had the family plan, the Bisons. We had Karen, Debbie, Kevin, Joey. Stephen showed up once in a while, and Dennis came over and did the book. And I can't be remiss to talk about the most dynamic duo of modified coaches ever in the history of Elba. That would be the Debbie Bison and Kent Brown show. I don't think they lost a ball game or two over the years. Kent was a pretty tough coach, but Debbie, she was really tough. But they were so good that one year I was able to bring up, much to Karen's dismay, 3 girls directly from 8th grade modified basketball right up to varsity. Krista Gallagher, Mary Moore, Sarah Ognabine all came up as freshmen and really contributed, and wouldn't have been able to do that unless they had the great coaching that they had at the modified level. So we were really, really blessed in Elba to have people that coached over the years that did such a wonderful job. And I mean, anybody ever want to look at the list, there's some people on here like, who the heck was that? Unbelievable amount of people that coached here at Elba. Blessed with 3 ADs over my time. The first one, poor Don Wilmot, he was up here. Now, I'm probably responsible for a couple of strands of hair that he lost off the top of his head, because he was the AD in my young years when I was a little crazy. And he had to put up with a lot of stuff. And he probably got a lot of headaches. So I did bring him something tonight that if you want it, Willie, you can come up and get it afterwards. Break those glasses. Let's see. It's in my bag someplace. Oh, here it is.
Like Santa Claus. White hair.
I brought you a coupon, Willie, for $1.50 off Excedrin, 100 count larger, but you better use it pretty quick because it runs out at the end of the month. But I gave the poor guy a lot of headaches over the years. And then we had Steve Chiacco and then Karen. And they, you just can't survive without really good people in that position. And I'm glad he's here tonight because I was really blessed with, in my opinion, 2 really great people to work for that were administrators at our school. And early on, he started first as our high school principal and then became our superintendent, and that's Bob Smith. And Paul Ballard, who was our high school principal for many years once Bob went up to become superintendent. And I'll tell you what, those people really had your back. You got the support, and they were there all the time. I don't think Bob missed very many football games in all the years that he was working at Elba Central School. And Paul was the same way. And you really, really appreciated it and made it easier to do your job when you had people like that as your bosses, and you knew that really would cover your back and take care of you, and then they respected the job that you were doing. This community of Elba, like I said, I'm lucky I didn't go away from that interview, because this place is really something special. I think it's one of the best kept secrets in the world. Volunteers, I can't tell you over the years how many people pop in to help us. We talked about Ted and Kevin, my super scouts. Well, I got to tell you one story. They went scouting to Clymer, and I was waiting for the call afterwards about the game. What's the score? So it's 10:30. I got to go to bed. They didn't call. So the next day I find out, well, they didn't get home on time. What happened was Kevin at halftime went over to the concession stand, and he heard about this strip club just outside Clymer, and he was going to drive over there with Teddy. Well, they took a wrong turn and ended up in East Podunk, someplace like that. And barely got home in time. I think Gene, I don't know if he was home in time to get to milk the cows or not, but they got lost and got home like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning from a trip they should have been home, and they had no cell phone service because they were in the middle of nowhere. But those guys really, really went everywhere. You know, Karen had a picture of the Ouija on my table. You know, where could you be without the Ouija? That guy was unbelievable for Elba. You know, really miss him. You know, Carol Norton filmed so many years for me. You know, and I could go on and on about people who just came in and helped whenever you needed something. It's just unbelievable. And as a coach, you know, we're talking about parents. And the first thing I think as a coach you better understand, that child is those parents' most prized possession. And if you don't ever figure that out, you're in coaching business, you have to understand that, okay? And you want to do what's right for the team, and you have to understand the parents have an extra special interest in their child, and there has to be some blend in there. And I'll tell you, in Elba, it's been unbelievable. The people have been very, very supportive over the years. You hear of so many coaches getting run out of their jobs because some parent got mad that their kid wasn't playing enough, and those are problems. And in Elba, you never have those problems. I mean, it's been, for me, just been unbelievable. Our boosters, you know, I know the Vacantes and the Cassets are still so active. They don't even have kids in playing anymore. You know, usually your boosters are the parents of the kids that are playing. They're just really there, you know, and I'm convinced the thing that has helped their basketball program the most was the use of getting the gun, which the boosters helped us purchase, and then our players going over to Buddy Brasky's camp over in Batavia. And our families, you know, just really unbelievable people, so many acts of kindness over the years that, you know, I can't mention them all. Then there's my wife. You guys got me in trouble tonight. You're telling her what a hard worker I am. Well, I'm going to go home and she's going to say, how come that job isn't done, and that job isn't done, and that job? And I said, listen. But she was so supportive over the years. Thank God for Dallas and Falcon Crest. Because when I was coaching football, every Friday night, where I was out scouting or whatever, she would come home from her teaching job, relax for a while, have a glass of wine, and she'd sit down and watch Dallas and Falcon Crest and forget about me. But over the years, you can't ask for anybody to be more understanding. And you know what? I wouldn't be able to do the job if she didn't support me in that aspect, you know, because that can be a lot of conflict in a household if you're never around. And my belief is you put in a maximum amount of work, you put in a maximum amount of scouting. Don't ask somebody to go do something you're not willing to do, you know. So if there's a game to scout, I should scout it before I send a assistant or JV coach or modified coach. I think that's really important. So would you please, so I don't get in any trouble, give my wife a wonderful round of applause. Then the age-old question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? What's more important, the players or their coach? Now, I'm going to tell you what. I've been blessed at Elba with wonderful players in both sports. I mean, it's been a long time since I coached football, but we really had it going here at Elba. I mean, it was a name to be reckoned with in Section 5 for football. You knew we were going to be there all the time, and we got that way in basketball. And you don't get that way unless you have players. You set standards. We had to set our standards awful high for our kids. But you have to have people that are willing to work hard and are willing to put in the extra time, are willing to go to camp, and willing to do this. And we had that. We had players that were fantastic. And you know, something that people don't understand about Elba students, in my role as guidance counselor, a lot of times I'd go over to some meetings at BOCES. These people come up and they'd grab my shirt and say, "You got any kids for me from Elba for next year?" Our kids were heads and tails above all the other students from the other schools. Our kids are very respectful, and I know as coaches we sometimes complain they're never working hard enough, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. Our kids are working so hard, and we're such wonderful people, and have gone on and become so successful. You know, it's really, really impressive. For the girls, I do want to apologize if I made you cry. It was the most difficult adjustment. Mary, don't put it all in. It was the most difficult adjustment I ever had, because as a football coach, guys are pretty cocky. And you got to sit on them pretty good, okay? And I can remember our '89 championship team. We never smiled at them. We never gave them a compliment. Now, they scored 333 points and gave up 29 the whole season. After we won the championship, that's when we smiled. 10 games. They'd come out of the film session and go, you know, we won the game 35-0, and I remember Chad Zambito once coming out and saying something like, "Jeez, you think we lost 35-0? You know, we used to grind them, but I found out women are different. And it took me a long time to figure that out. It was a long process. The girls made me a better coach because it allowed me to kind of tune in a little bit to an athlete. As I said, time has changed. As you've gone on as a coach, the philosophies have changed. And what I do now as a coach, and what I believe in, is how do you get your athletes to play their very best in the biggest game, and how do you put them in a position of comfort? We clap for that 25-0 team. And I'll tell you what, when we went to the state tournament, you know, you think I'd be nervous. I wasn't. I slept like a baby at that hotel. There was never a doubt in my mind that we weren't going to win that championship. I just felt that comfortable, and the girls got me to that point. Now, obviously, it took some studying by me and research and different things, but to get to a point where, you know, you could do a better job early on. Maybe you coached the Vince Lombardi style, but as years have gone on, it really changed, and I think really became a better coach. You know, I knew I couldn't figure them out. I didn't try to figure them out. I just went with it, and then I started making progress as a coach. I'm just going to throw out a couple terms. Football players, you might have remembered these. Up-downs. Ooh, yeah. Any of you that didn't play football, an up-down is like one of the almost craziest things you do. You chop your feet, when coach blows a whistle, you throw your body on the ground and pop back up. Okay? Those don't sound... Kevin's not going to demonstrate. He's too old. But I can remember before the first time we beat Oakfield, and we had those guys doing 120 up-downs a day. That's 30 a quarter. And they cried a little bit, but I told them to win the game, and then you don't have to worry about it. Gassers. Oh, yeah. Everybody loved, yeah, Dustin's going. Now Dustin's in shape, but back then, he used to run like he had a piano on his back. And gassers, you'd go down 40 yards, come back, go down, come back, and you were timed in 30-some seconds to get it done. 6 inches. You had to assume the crucifixion position on the ground, lift your legs up for 6 inches, and hold them up there until I felt like blowing the whistle. Okay? Pork Chop Hill. Anybody remember Pork Chop Hill? It's gone. But it was good. It was good. Charlie would be down at the bottom of the hill. I'd be up at the top, my arms folded, whistle in my mouth, and a little smirk on my face. And I knew right then and there that every one of those guys running up that hill just wanted to bump into me, knock me over, and send me down the hill.
You're right.
I know. And then 5/5 for victory. We used to run our fifths around the football field, and we would time them. And I can remember when, we talk about Ali Egley, who was a great competitor, when he was a senior, we did 5/5 every day. And the guys would try to beat him. And what they would do is, one guy would run fast on lap 1, then the guy that's going to do lap 2 would go a little slower, so he was a little rested. The whole year, nobody beat him once in his fifths. That's awesome. That's a great job. Girls, I know they love this term, ladders. Stairs. Hallways. Girls are different. By the end of my career, and I used to at the end of each season, they had to write an essay critiquing me. And in that essay, I was looking for ideas. And one of the ideas was the girls all day would worry about what they were doing in practice that day. So in the final years of my career, I gave them a practice schedule with the time, and also on the bottom what the running was for the day. Because you know how women can get, sometimes they get praise on their mind, then they don't practice. So I let them know exactly. And that was a fantastic idea. I got that from one of the players to do that. And that was just such a good idea. It made practice so much better because we didn't have to worry about what we were going to do because they knew. And whenever I handed them out the monthly schedule, the first thing they looked at, they didn't want to do hallways. They hated hallways. You run around the first floor of the school, and they looked to see how many times they would have that on their schedule. Couple funny moments. Let's talk about the Bad News Bears. My only failure at Elba Central School was coaching baseball, JV baseball, for 2 years. My wife was very happy because when I took the job, she said, if you coach that team, I'm taking the money and buying a microwave. Was that 1979? We still have that microwave at home, and it still works. But 2 stories about the Bad News Bears. Charlie was coaching the varsity, and he got me roped into doing the JV. So I went down, and we were going to Albion one day, and they dropped us off to play our game, and Charlie went and took his team to play his game at wherever the varsity field was. Well, they come back. The varsity was done with their game. They come back. We're in the second inning. It's like 33-2. It's like, we got to get out of here. Mercy. And then we played a game it was against Attica, and I had my star right fielder, Kevin Bezos. It was the only place I could put him. I was hoping they're not going to hit him the ball. Well, sure enough, some guy hits the bases are loaded, fly ball to right field. Hits him right on the top of his head. And the ball starts rolling. Now, Marty Hine was in center field. He starts running after the ball, and he throws his glove to try to stop the ball. They were very good football players, but they weren't very good baseball players. I see Dusty's here. I got a funny story about Dusty. We were playing at Avon, and we were losing. Dave Zielinski made a great catch, somehow got up the field. I don't know how we got all the way up there, but we got in field goal position and called, give me a timeout. So I go out to the field. Here's Dusty. His eyes are like so big, it was scary. He was the center, the snap for the field goal. He goes, Coach, I'm so nervous, so much pressure. So I got my huddle and I go, Dusty, pressure is when you're married, you got 2 kids, you just lost your job, you have no money to buy food. That's pressure. Snap the ball. And then there's the Joe Mickey story. It's a classic. It was in the same game. Now, Charlie happened to be up top for some reason. He was up on the perch for the game, and there was a fumble in the middle of the game. So Joe Mickey picks up the ball, and he's like this, standing there. He's looking at Zielinski. I'm like, Charlie yells, run, Mickey, run! So all of a sudden, Joe starts running with the ball. So after the game, we asked him, Joe, what's going on? He says, I think I was knocked out. Standing
That is hilarious. Oh my God.
We were also the first team in Genesee region to have night football practices. Now, back in the old days, we were on NST or OST. That was NOAC Standard Time or OGene Standard Time. So if you did a drill and we weren't happy with your performance, we just took our watch and turned it back to when the drill was supposed to start, and we did it over. We didn't care what time we got home. So there were nights it was starting to get dark. And we practiced down in that back field by the old bus garage. And all I did was I had the guys bring their cars over, turn them on, put their lights on, and then we practiced under the lights right there on the field. No problem. Basketball, I think, was more fun. The girls were just, I don't know if I have any crazy stories. You know, I know Marcy Jonathan's here, and I remember the night she was going for 1,000 points. She was really out there because everybody knew she was going to get her 1,000 point that night, except Marcy. So we're all waiting, and she scores a basket, and they blow the whistle, and she turns around and had this look on her face like, what is going on? I had no idea that she got, that's the kind of player she was. She never worried about whether she got 1,000 points. She was just for the team. I see Sarah Dorman's here. I see Mary Ellen's here. The Dorman girls, they really gave me a lot of laughs over the years. Sarah would always be busting them on Mary Ellen, right? Probably still is, right, Mary Ellen? And what a pleasure. And I had them, I think I coached Dorman girls for about 15 years. I had Kelly and Sarah and Mary Ellen and Caitlin and Amy and Anna. So that was something. The last thing, a couple special moments. The championships are all special. You know, when you win them, I remember that 82 Rosie was talking about the spaghetti dinner. You know, Charlie, he's a big Italian cook and that, so we're going to make spaghetti right at my house in the basement. We must have had 28 guys over there cooking spaghetti. It was a great time. It was a real special win, and sometimes you don't really appreciate the moment. You know, so many things are going on, and you win that championship that you sometimes don't take a step back. You'd almost like to step out of the scene and look at what's happening in the events. And, you know, those two teams, the football was really special, 82 and 89. The girls, all their titles, you know, that first one was real special in 95, just because we had never won one. And I remember Amy D was playing, and she came out, she says, Coach, in the last couple seconds, I just started shaking. My body started shaking because we were going to win. And it was a really tough ball game. And it was neat, the 2000 when we went on to the States, that I never even thought about going on to the States. And that team, Ange is here. Squaw was her nickname, right? Remember that, Ange? She was mother hen of that team. Took care of us really well, and we went on to the state tournament. It was just such a great time. But in the championship game, we played a really tough team from Fillmore, and our girls came out and really kicked some butt. And 2001 was a special one because we were losing in the semis by 8 with a minute left. We scored 10 points in a row, won that game, and then in the championship game, Sarah Dorman was 15 for 16 from the free throw line in that big win. So those were special. Mary Moore's here. Her floater. Who can forget that day at the college? It was so awesome. Elba won one of the Ds. Notre Dame won the other Ds. We filled the GCC. There was over 2,000 people. They had to delay the start of the game just to get it going. And it was a great Notre Dame team. There was a young Volpe on that team and Tucker. And we were down by a point. We fouled Colleen Tucker. She missed the free throw. And normally as a coach, you take a timeout to set up the play. And I'm not into that. I'm into letting the flow go. And Mary came down and put up a floater right over Volpe For the 2 points, Krista Gallagher stole the ball after the inbound, and the people just came right out of the bleachers onto the field. It was just an awesome night. And I know there's a couple guys here when we went to the Livonia game. And we had a whole bunch of Italians on that team. Chad, Joey, Mr. Norm, I think he was here someplace, I saw him around. We had a whole crew of guys, and they played Rocky before the start of the game. And our guys just got so amped up for that game. They were undefeated, we were undefeated, and we just went out and just spanked them. It was just a really, really awesome game. Frankie Penna was also in on a famous funny play. Coach O'Gene called it Gap 9. We were playing against Oakfield at 6-2, sectional game, 1982, and we had too many guys in the field. And Charlie went out, there was a timeout, and Charlie went out and said something to Frank like, could you kind of sneak off the field? Now, how did you get that guy to sneak off the field? But I remember he was lining up and he was looking for a gap to get into, and there wasn't one because everybody was in one of them, so he just plopped himself down. We ended up winning that game. I know she's not here. I don't even know what state or country she's in here, but Wojo, Lisa Wojtaszek, in our 2000 game, it was really funny. The girls came over to my house for brunch before we went to play the game in Buffalo, and we watched Hoosiers. And in the ball game, when we're playing, we're tied. Lisa gets fouled. She comes off the court, she's crying. She's got to shoot 2 free throws. I'm like, what are you crying about? I says, you got it made. Because Ali, the guy in Hoosiers who makes those underhanded free throws, wore number 13. Lisa wore number 13. I says, Ali, you're going to make it. She goes out there and she made a free throw. We won the game and went into the States. So those kinds of things were really special. And obviously going to the States was just an unbelievable experience. I'd still throw the game in and watch it every so often. And we win every time, which is really And lastly, as I enter what I like to affectionately call the winter of my life, and you get an opportunity to reflect on your career. And some people work a job and they get a clock or a pin or a pen or something to take home from all the years of service. I feel that I was so blessed at Elba because I had these unbelievable memories for the rest of my life. And players, and what I really, I just love when I go on Facebook because so many of my players have me on Facebook, so I get to look at their families and see what they're doing and all that kind of stuff. And it's always a shout out if anybody's looking for a Facebook friend. I love to look at families, friends, see how they're doing. I know my wife can remember when I had 0 friends, and Cassie Engel became my first friend. Showed me how to get on. Susie said I got to get on Facebook, and then Cassie got me squared away. But I really like looking to see players that had played for me, what they're doing in their life, and how their families are, and they have kids, and I get to see all this stuff. It's really awesome. And I've been, like I said, so blessed that I remember in my first year here, somebody said, after we had that good football season, you should go look for another job somewhere. I don't know quite what they meant by that, but they said, get out of town now while you have a chance. And I'm so glad that I never left Elba, because nowhere could I have gone and experienced what I did here. Thank you.